Okay, great. Hi, everybody. So welcome back. We're doing another session of our Creating Your Best You series. So we're getting close to the end of it now for the end of 2021, which is great. It's quite exciting to go into 2022. So today I have Nancy Ortenburg with me, and she was Sladich when I met her, so I'm going to use that, and Ortenburg because we love Peter. And so Nancy I've known for a very long time. When we were 16, 17, I think, and we used to work on provincial student council things back in Canada. And Nancy is going to share some expertise and wisdom with us about professional careers and the philosophy behind about getting to your best you in terms of looking for things that excite you and drive you and set you on fire in the work world, which to us in chiropractic is often the play world. So Nancy started off with her Bachelor of Education in Geography and History, and then took a turn and started off as in bus driving for a little while, and then worked her way up through 25 years of working in public transit, and then going into the private sector and real estate, and then into software. And so she's got a lot of really amazing experience and wisdom and insights to share with us today. So hello, Nancy.
Hello, Mary Ellen.
So do you want to share maybe some of your story with us of, how your work world evolved and how you have kind of evolved through it? So.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on. It's thrilling to be here. So I think that, throughout high school, we gravitate towards certain subject areas, and, the pattern of following in your family's footsteps or someone who's close to you who has a certain profession or degree, and, you get to know that. So then you naturally pursue whatever that field of study might be, because it's familiar to you and you understand it. And reflecting on preparing for this conversation today, it dawned on me. I was listening to a Brene Brown podcast with Esther Perel, and she talks a lot about the stories in your household and stories in your family. And I was always encouraged to pursue something at university where I could support myself, that I wouldn't have to rely on anybody else. I was told you better go to university, and if you spend all that money on going and getting your education, you better not graduate with like a degree in basketball. You better be able to support you, and you'll always be able to get a job. So in the threads of that conversation were always about safety and not taking risks. So, naturally I pursued things that I was very passionate about. Mary Ellen and I met when we were doing student leadership. And we were both presidents of our high schools and presidents for our regions within the province, and doing lots of fun stuff. But for me, that was all in the education space. So I didn't, as a young teenager, really think much outside my view. It seemed to just make so much sense that naturally I was going to become a teacher. And, my highest goal was maybe working at the board office, or, definitely being a principal. I wanted to be like a boss of some kind, because boss, let's say. But that was always my, that just seemed to be the path. You went from high school to university to teachers college to working in a school and becoming a principal, and that would be my career. And that was a very meaningful, purposeful, giving back to the community. It's all touch on my value systems, well-paying job, good benefits, good pension plan, you're set, right? And so that was the scope of my thinking at the time. As I went through university, and I was very fortunate to get into a highly coveted program where you would begin your teaching degree as you were doing your undergraduate degree. So I think 0.3% of applicants actually got into this program, and I managed to get in. So I felt super fortunate, and I felt like I owed them to complete the program. But I remember in my second year of my undergraduate degree, and I was doing a teaching round, because instead of taking 5 courses a year, we took 6, one of those being your education course, and you also had to complete 4 weeks of practice teaching. So I remember standing in front of this classroom, and I was probably 21 at the time, something like that. And I thought, okay, and I remember this, kids were going crazy. It was absolute pandemonium. There was no discipline whatsoever in this classroom. And I'm standing in front of the classroom, and I'm thinking, okay, so you retire when you're 65. So that means I have to do this for another 43 years. Oh, I swear, like, oh, hell no. Like, I cannot do this for the next 42 years. But I had, in that thought, it was like, well, as long as that door is closed and I don't need to deal with the politics of the school board, I don't need to deal with the politics of the union, the politics of the teachers. I love the teaching part of it. This dynamic of the way schools were being regulated, disciplined, or not was not in line with my value system. And I thought, well, maybe I need to go work at a private school. Okay, but you work at private schools, and at the time, salaries were far less than working public school teachers. Very few benefits, no pension plan. But, I'm kind of stuck in this, aren't I? And so it's funny. So I did complete the degrees. I did my next 3 years and finished it off. So, as I was told, make sure you graduate so that at least you can have a job. Doesn't matter if you hate your job, but you can put food on the table and you can take care of yourself and you won't be reliant on anybody. And so I did that. And funny enough, when I graduated, there was a downturn in the Ontario economy, and there was not a teaching job to be had in the province. There were about 5,000 teachers that graduated in the same year as I did, and there were no teaching jobs to be had. So in comes transit. 2-3 years prior to that, I'd gotten a summer job driving a transit bus in my hometown. Bit of a story behind how all that happened, but long and short of it was I did drive a transit bus for one summer. The next 2 summers I worked in the office, and I leveraged my geography degree. And I was doing an urban geography degree, so I know a lot about planning and population densities and urban design and things like that. So transit planning was a natural fit. Most people go into transit planning being an engineer. I came into it as a geographer, and I didn't really specialize in it, but I did enough transit master plans to fully understand the process and how routes are designed and predicting ridership loads and things like that. So I couldn't get a job, and so I was applying to native reserves in northern Canada. I was applying to schools overseas because I had spent 3 months teaching in Austria as part of my qualifications. So I was offered a job in Taiwan, and I went to my boss at Transit and I said, listen, I don't have a full-time job here, but I've just been offered a job in Taiwan, but I need to let them know by Friday. And he's like, well, you can't go to Taiwan. And I said, well, then I need a job offer by Friday. And sure enough, by 10 o'clock in the morning Friday, I had a 3-year contract sitting on my desk, making twice what I would have made in Taiwan. So I stayed in transit, and I ended up setting up a training department in my transit system. I was a service supervisor. I did accident investigations. I became certified to teach people how to drive buses, and I had signing authority for the province of Ontario to sign off on their, in Ontario, you need this thing called an air brake endorsement, and you need a C driver's license. So I did those programs and had a fabulous time contributing to my community, and always felt that working in public transit was really helping the most disadvantaged people in the community, people who cannot afford a car but need to get to work, people who want to do better for the environment and want to support that method of transportation, and just being integral to the community and helping it function was really an empowering job. It was like, wow, I get paid for doing this. It was a lot of fun until it wasn't. And that's when I really got into organizational development, organizational culture. The culture changed for many reasons. And it really just wasn't the organization that I had worked for 7 years prior. So, as someone who's in a career, and we've all been in positions where you're working somewhere and something changes, generally leadership or some significant influencing factor on the group of people that are there. And you have to make a choice. Am I going to keep my head down and ride this out and hope for the better and do what I can to keep it great? Or am I going to say, no, you know what, I'm done. I've done all I can here, and I need to move on. So It's interesting, as I was thinking about this and preparing, I thought, you know what, this is really about the Serenity Prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. So if I'm going to accept them, can I be serene? To me is really the question about that. If you say you're accepting them and then you bitch and complain over a bottle of wine every Friday night with your best mates, that's not serenity, right? The courage to change the things I can. And, in many instances, I took the brave, I leaned in, like like thought leaders are saying, I was brave, I dared to lead. And I got bonked on the head many times. And, then if you can't change things, then, the wisdom to know the difference. Sometimes you just have to say, okay, there's a reason, a season, a lifetime, and this is not my lifetime. I can go do these things in other places. So scary. I made the leap to another company that ended up lasting about 2 years. And then a funding issue happened. It was not performance related. I got laid off. That was devastating. My next job was a startup company. We spent money like crazy. It wasn't going well. All the employees knew it. And that's, I'll talk about voice of the employee later on. But again, very different cultural environment. And that company ran out of money and folded. So laid off again. And then I got into a role working for a national association, was able for public transit, went back into public transit, and was able to support the industry for almost 10 years, just developing training programs, courses, some organization development things, which the industry was not really ready yet to take on. And then moved into many other roles where I worked in sustainability, innovation, organizational development, culture change, business improvements, and eventually landed about 7 years ago working with the Customer Experience Professionals Association and got certified in the discipline of customer experience, which is a very holistic 6-pillar discipline and looks at everything from vision, values, strategy, product design, voice of the customer, voice of the employee, and how it all fits together from an end-to-end perspective, but looking at it through the customer lens, not to the very typical operational or financial metric lens. So here I am today, working in a software technology company on a global scale, helping to improve the customer experience. And I started out as dreaming of being a high school teacher. So who would have thought?
Journey, isn't it? But it's amazing through all those experiences. We often think we're either underqualified or not overqualified for some things, but all of those skills are so transferable, and especially like going from teaching and then going into using your geography skills to go into urban planning. There's such a huge amount of transferable skill there. And particularly when you get into the customer service side of things, which is a completely different perspective that most people will have in terms of what is your experience using this service. Mm-hmm. And some people don't even think about asking those questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you change a culture that won't look at the base of the culture, which is the customer, which is why you're in business, really? So.
Well, yeah, and great question, because there's so many different thought leaders on culture and culture change. In my experience, there is so much you can do from the grassroots level. And most of us, let's face it, in our positions are part of the grass. We're the roots of the organization. Most people are not the chief decision maker, the person who can make things happen, make the decision. We are putting money to this. We are putting resources to this. This is the way we are going to operate. This is what we value as an organization. There are few leaders who will take that bold move and hold people to accountable, because there's all kinds of trickle down. When a leader says, we pick this metric, this is what we will hold ourselves accountable to. Now I want you to design for me all the trickle down metrics that are leading indicators and lagging indicators of our success in that top number. Are we going to hold people accountable through their performance reviews? Are we going to hold their leaders accountable through objectives that align to that? It's great, put most mission, vision, value statements get put onto a picture frame or laminated onto a corkboard, and they get stuck up on the wall in every meeting room, and then they have dust collecting on them for the next 5 years. Nobody does anything with them.
Right.
What is the, it's funny because when I was a few positions ago, I was doing a culture change. And one of the things I thought that we needed to do at the beginning was to agree on what is culture. And so we did a lot of research, we had a lot of workshops, we talked about a lot of things. And at the end of the day, I kind of felt like that moment when Steve Jobs returned to Apple, and he was getting all the presentations of all the different hundreds of projects that were going on in Apple to innovate and all this stuff. And he stopped and he was like, this is way too complicated. And he did the famous 4 square thing. So when I talk about culture, I think it's very simple. It's how do we get things done around here? And how do we treat each other while we're doing it? And everything kind of falls into those 2 buckets, right? Are we super efficient and processes are designed and everybody understands it because we have great training and we're very clear, we're transparent with objectives or what needs to be done? And that's great, but do we do that in a militaristic, hierarchical, patriarchal methodology where only white men are promoted? Might work. There's nothing wrong with that formula unless you happen to be a person of diversity, color, or female.
Funny that.
So then you go back to your value system and go, should I stay here? Because the pension's really great. The choice is that going to make you happy?
Interesting. So tell us more about what drives your philosophy behind the decisions that you make and how you got to where you are.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'd love to say that I've been like this for the last, multiple years, but no, I think it's an evolution. We all get there, and we all get there in different ways. So I'm going to share a screen. I've got some artwork to help explain my point. Let me know when you can see that.
I'm going to need eyeballs for this one.
Can you see that?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. So I thought I'd title this "What's the Point?" And so I'm not a fantastic artist, but it's something that makes me happy. And I've painted some pictures over the years, and I figured out a way to actually get text put onto them. And this has been a favorite quote of mine since I was about 14. I grew up on the shores of Lake Ontario, down near the harbor, spent all of my summer days riding my bike down there, hanging out on the beach. And not until after university did I actually learn how to sail, and used to race sailboats competitively. And one of the things is that, to reach a port, we must sail, sometimes with the wind and sometimes against it. But we must sail and not drift nor lie at anchor. It's always been one of the motivating things for me to know that, you can't sit and wallow in your own misery. You can. It's healthy to sit and wallow in your own misery. It is not healthy to sit and wallow in your own misery for too long, right? Also, something tragic happens to you and 24 hours later, you're like, yeah, I'm fine, off we go, is also not healthy. So there's always, grieving processes, things happen. The sailing, the analogy that I love about this picture here is, so I've painted the boats, and if any of your listeners know how to sail, being where you're located, I'm sure lots of people are familiar with sailing, but they're in the downwind position. So the wind is blowing from behind. It's a lovely way to sail. It's very slow, it's pleasant. The boat rocks a little bit, but generally it's quite lovely to sail that. It's also the slowest point, called point of sail in direction, to have the wind blowing from behind you, sort of pushing you along. Slow, it's gentle, it's pushing you along. There's not a lot of bumps. The fastest point of sail is actually at about 45 degrees to the wind coming head on the nose, and the boat is off to the side. You're 45 degrees in the water. You're hanging on for dear life. You're trying to balance the boat by sitting up on the top rail and bring it down while you're fighting the wind. And you get splashed and knocked about, and the boom can snap and smack you in the head or other, wherever. But it's also the fastest way to move.
It's exhilarating too.
It's exhilarating as well.
Really exhilarating.
And so this is the choices we make. Are we going to sail downwind slowly, calmly, beautiful sunny day? You've got your chute up, and you're managing with very thin little lines. If anyone's ever had to sail the chute, that when you're running downwind and you've got your quarter to half inch thick lines, and they've got to be cranked down on the turnbuckles, and it's really, really hard work. That's kind of what life is like. There is, nothing super sexy that would be hitting social media waves about sailing downwind, right? Everything that's super sexy is like going fast, getting soaked. We're like, bouncing crashing through the waves, right? And I think we all put a huge amount of pressure on ourselves. I think I did too, but I want to rise to the top. I want to get here. I want to have this kind of house. I want to be taking these kind of vacations. And the
life happens.
Choosing the harder path can sometimes reap rewards, for sure. Sometimes you're going to fail. Choosing to go downwind slowly and calmly probably means fewer bumps, not so scary, but there's neither one is right or wrong. It's just about where did you want to get to and how fast do you want to get there? How quickly do you want to get there?
I think it's timing too, because as those bumps hit you in life and different things happen with families, with children, with everything else around you and friends, sometimes there's a lot to be said for stillness.
For sure. Absolutely.
And I don't think we give ourselves that still time to process the things that happen. We're too busy rushing to the next thing, or worrying about the next thing, and worrying about all the other balls we have in the air,
Yeah.
And
sometimes even when you're sailing downwind, there's a storm that comes up behind you.
Yeah.
Right? And shit happens.
Yeah.
Right? It's really about how, when you're in it, you have to be in it to process it. Absolutely. However that works for you, whether it's therapy, getting away from everything and being by yourself, if it's possible to do that. Maybe you've got commitments and you can't just bugger off for a week and go to a cabin in the woods and bawl your eyes out, whatever it is. And sometimes pieces of it don't come out for years down the road. You think you've totally dealt with something, and something comes up because now you're ready to process that piece. I didn't get married till I was 36. And, any female out there, and it's funny, I was talking with some of my colleagues in Bangalore a few days ago. They were all young men, and we were comparing stories about, older female family members constantly hounding you about when you're going to get married and have a family, right? And I said, there is no culture in the world that has the corner market on aunties or, asking embarrassing questions about your love life. And I didn't get married till I was 36. And when we decided to get married fairly quickly, we still did a big formal church reception, 180 people, that kind of thing. We pulled it off in about 7 months, I guess, 6 months. And of course, I was like, oh my gosh, for the love of God, really? No, I'm 36. I don't want to waste any time. But for me, it was, I was not going to commit to anything until I was really sure. And my litmus test, I had 2 litmus tests. The first, most important one was, how did I feel about myself when he wasn't around? Did I feel loved, beautiful, secure, cherished, even when he wasn't there? And the second test was, how does he act around kids? And so Peter passed both of those with flying colors. And so, we got married, and it was very happy, and it was, everything that we had dreamed of. And unfortunately, 6 months later, we lost our first daughter. And so, sometimes shit really happens. And she was I was 22 weeks along into my pregnancy. So some people talk a week, some people, so it's a little over 5 months. And yeah, that sucked. It was truly, truly awful. And I mentioned the Esther Perel beforehand. She talks a lot about stories, and I've done a number of different courses, and uh, you know, I'm going to sum them all up as courses on how to be a human being, right? There's so many different modalities out there, and it was really like, how do I choose to think about this? Do I choose the story of, oh, woe is me? Do I choose the story of the doctor should have told me more about being pregnant and what I should do to avoid this? Nobody knows why it happened. It happened. And it's interesting because Peter and I talked a lot about how we were feeling, how we were grieving. One of the things we did was we wrote a letter together to parents who had lost a baby. And we gave it to the hospital, and we wrote on it, we signed it, and we said, please feel free to use this with any grieving parents. Full disclosure. Now, unfortunately, because of like legal stuff, the social worker said the hospital lawyers wouldn't allow them to use it. Whatever. I still published it on Facebook and put it out there. And if anybody finds it, I don't even know where it is now. But it was really my perspective of having to birth a child knowing that she wasn't going to make it. She only lived for about a minute and a half. Her lungs weren't mature enough to keep going. And from my husband's perspective of standing there feeling like, well, he wasn't birthing the baby, right? Like he's holding my hand. He felt it, like, I mean, his sense, like, I just felt like I was in the way. Like I thought I should just leave the room because like, what was I contributing to this except for holding your hand? So how you choose to look at something and how you choose to leverage that. And I still don't know what, like, what's the point? What was the point of all of that? Well, maybe the point was that I've helped so many people get through their grief. Maybe the point was I learned how to grieve. I don't know. Whatever the point was, maybe that point won't even become apparent to me for another 10 or 15 years, even though I have two very healthy children who are, 12 and 14. I don't know. But I do know that wallowing in that and thinking about it from a negative perspective was not going to help me. Wasn't going to help me get over it, wasn't going to help me move forward. So, the other piece of that to know that I learned is that pain and trauma can't be compared. My pain of losing a child may be just as tragic to someone as losing their job, because their job is their identity, right? Maybe they've been laid off because of, I was laid off because of COVID. And the whole thing, it's business, it's not personal, doesn't help, right? So you can't compare pain and trauma from one person's trauma to another person's trauma. And Esther Perel talks to us a lot. She's like, how do you compare with your family being exterminated in Auschwitz? Like, and similarly, my family, before they came to Canada, suffered terrible atrocities in World War II. And that was part of the story of growing up, is hearing these things. And it's like, you can't complain about anything because you didn't get attacked by this army and that army and didn't get the house burned down and didn't know where your next meal was coming from. So, but that's not fair, because your pain and your trauma are relevant to your current experiences, but how you deal with them, now that's within your control, right? And I think that sometimes we talk about mental health, it almost gets dramatized to acknowledging the mental health condition with not nearly enough emphasis on, okay, so you're in a pile of shit. What are you going to do about that?
It's not solution oriented.
Right.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, and we'll take it back to sort of the career aspect of things, is what if you're in a pile of shit at work? Right? Do you just keep your mouth shut and keep on? Or do you change things? And everyone's answer is different for them, but let me change the slide here. I was doing a course, and this quote is actually from A Course in Miracles. And it's funny, I wanted to paint an owl because I thought an owl, I've always wanted to paint an owl. They're really, really hard to paint, especially when you do a snowy white owl on snow. Just that white on white technique is really difficult. But I wanted him to be looking really wise, but I think to me, he almost looks a little bit doubting here as well at the same time. And I thought this quote really landed with this painting because the truth about you is so lofty. It's so impressive. The truth about who you are, the truth about who I am is so important and so beautiful that nothing unworthy of God is worthy of you. In other, maybe more lay terms, none of us deserve to be shit on. So if that is true, if you're getting shit on, you go back to the Serenity Prayer and say, am I going to have the courage to change this? Am I going to set boundaries? Am I going to declare that I don't like that you're shitting on me? I don't like this shit. I want to get out of it. Or are you going to say, you know what? I am choosing to be stuck. I can't get out of this. Or I'm going to take this for now, but I have a plan. Right? I'm not going to quit my job. I'm going to stick it out until I find another position so that I don't have that insecure piece in between. So maybe you can do that. And knowing the difference. But what I've learned is that sitting in the shit, complaining about it, whining about it, carrying on about it year after year after year is neither of those. You're not choosing, you're not doing anything, you're not moving forward, you're not sailing with the wind and you're not sailing against it. You're just sort of sitting there and letting the wind do whatever it wants with you, right? So I think that this one is so important because as women, we often have a martyr syndrome. Maybe it comes to being connected with birthing because you're so connected to your children. But even setting your boundaries out there with your kids, I've never been of the philosophy that I'm my best friend's or my child's best friend. Even when they're in their 40s, I'm still going to be their mom, and I'm going to still say, you're screwing up, right? I think my job is to be their coach and their mentor, and with unconditional love. But if they're doing something wrong, you're doing something wrong. You need to think about this, So I'm probably more of a student of the tougher love because I was raised that way as well. Every therapist out there is going to point to an issue with the parents as the cause of someone's distress. Yes. Yep. We always screw our kids up. It's just like, it's an inevitability. Don't ever think of it as a failure. Because what might be the perfect solution for you and your family is not going to be perfect for someone else. And hence we come full circle back to our conversation. Right? But the one thing is true, that the truth about each of us is so lofty. We are all so worthy that nobody should stand for being treated in a way that we wouldn't treat God or anybody that we, whether you call God, Buddha, universal energy, the force, whatever you want to call it. We are all, if we are all part of that, then we all deserve to be treated with respect, and we should also be respectable. So I feel like course that's all I have to say about that.
Beautiful. Very clear. Beautiful.
Thank you. And then the last one, and this kind of goes to the talking about how we see things. And I have these up above my desk, so I look at them every day. If you've ever read the book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, it's interesting because I first read Jonathan Livingston Seagull when I was in high school, I think grade 10 or 11. And this line never actually landed with me. I was more at that point in time, I was reading that book from the perspective of this little seagull who's not following the pack. They're going to do their own thing. I mean, I was very much expected as a member of my church community to be the good girl, go to university, come back home, marry somebody from the church, have a bunch of kids, clean and wash, hell no. Now, I got married, I had kids, I cook, clean, and wash, but my husband and I split those chores 50-50, right? There is no way that I'm working 40 to 50 hours a week in a professional career and also catering to everyone while they sit around and watch television.
Yeah.
No, that's no,
Yep.
no, that's
The
not
same.
it. Not going to be me. Sorry. So the interesting thing about this is that you're always free to change your mind and choose a different future. So I chose a slightly altered future, or a different past. So I think that when it comes to the stories that we tell in our families, the ways that we've interpreted, you know, the crazy uncle at, you know, Christmas dinner that everyone cringes because they have to sit beside him. Whatever it is that's happened to us in our past, you know, when you get to a point where you can say, yeah, I want to rewrite that story. Here are the facts. A, B, and C did happen. But what's the story that I've made up about it? How did I, if you've gone through a divorce, how did I make up a story about my former partner or any relationship, right? He was such a jerk. He did this, he did that. Maybe I could have communicated better. Maybe if we had talked about things in a different way, you know, maybe he was really struggling with understanding me and I didn't see it. How do we change the perspective on the way things happen? I mean, there's so much happening, especially in Canada in the last couple of years, with the way we look at Indigenous culture, the way they were treated, the stereotypes that we put on them. When you look at things like the Me Too movement and how that took off, changing the story around how those women acted and whether they were forced to do that, you know, courage to accept the things I cannot change the things I can. You know, if I want to be an actress, that might have been the game they had to play to get there, right? So even if something happened in your past that you're not totally proud of, well, you know, can you choose a different path by saying, I choose to look at those things through a different lens now with the more maturity that I have, and not continue to beat myself up for something I probably didn't have much control over or the wisdom to be able to manage at the time. And then I think where that comes full circle, Mary Ellen, is really around, you know, your health and the trauma that people carry. And I know that you see that in your practice a lot. Burdens that people have placed upon themselves and carried for years and cannot let go of them. And that just manifests at a cellular level and in whatever ailments they've got, right? I'm not saying that I cleaned up my shit. Oh, good God, I got bags of it, just like everyone else, right? But, you know, awareness is the first step.
It's interesting, actually, because I think when you look at changing the past, it's like, oh, you can't change the past. It's like, no, you can't actually change an event that has happened, but you can change and rewrite your perspective on it. And I think with maturity, as you grow up, the things that have happened through your younger years, when you're looking at them through different lenses. And I mean, with NLP, we use different altered perspectives or multiple perspectives exercise that we do, looking at it from this perspective, or what if I looked at it from over here? What if I looked at it from over here? What if I was standing over there? And then looking back down on a situation, it does completely shift things and other things, because when you're working like that, you're working in an energy field, which is timeless. So many different perspectives and voices and different things can happen and be drawn into that to change a perspective, to make things more clear. And it's remarkable the amount of healing that can happen in those small little conversations, you know, and that conversation is with yourself, but somebody guiding you through it, you know, and it's quite remarkable, you know.
Yeah.
But it's amazing too, that when you look at the career choices people make in their professional lives, if they aren't internally driven, and they are dependent on external things to happen to push them into different areas of their lives, they miss so much, and different opportunities, or, it's like that sliding doors thing, all those
Yeah,
things come into
yeah.
play and change people's directions,
And I fully believe, honestly, that the universe is at play. It pushes you into different opportunities, different experiences. Um, I've been forced into unemployment. That was awful. I hated it. Um, I still highly value being secure, which means that, I take a lot of care in my financial planning, and, because that's, call it a value, call it a hang up. I don't care which one you call it. I can't live on the edge of, credit card debt all the time. It drives me crazy. And so that just is what it is, right? But I think the last photo that I've got with you guys is, you know,
Love.
it's just choosing to be like what makes you happy. And it was funny when I was trying to figure out how to paint the sky. As I was painting it, I was actually vacillating between sunrise and sunset. So when I look at this painting, to me, it's still a little bit of an enigma. Is the sun setting or is the sun rising? Doesn't really matter. It's whatever you choose. Do I choose it to be a sunrise? Do I choose it to be a sunset? I choose to be in that place with my partner, my best friend, and near the water. I really love that. But it's just the choosing no matter what really will simplify your life, right? If you are, the holidays upon us, if you have to go to that dinner, that family gathering, or that friend gathering that you just can't do it, is there a way that you can choose it? If you have to go and you have to put on a happy face, is there some aspect of it that you can choose it so that it isn't miserable the entire time and you're not justifying why you shouldn't be there and having all those thoughts running through your head? It was interesting. I was working with a counselor once, and I said, I just don't know how to stop like obsessing, but it's like I'm in my head, logically, I'm saying I'm choosing this, but like I can't stop thinking about whatever it was. And she's like, hey, stop talking about it. Stop allowing your brain to talk about it. I'm like, and it was just, seemed so simple. And I'm like, okay, simple but hard. And she's like, yeah, simple but very hard.
But hard, very hard.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. For a long time, when you do the all night video, or you're driving wherever and you start thinking about stuff, and you start thinking about things that you have promised yourself you are not going to dwell on. Like road rage. Road rage happens in a blink of an eye, a nanosecond. And yet, that jerk cut me off. You could be having that conversation in your head 5 hours later. Ducks don't do that when they cross paths in the pond. Oh, that bugger is trying to take all this room in the pond, right? No, they cross paths, they squawk at each other, they flap their wings a little bit, and then they just paddle away. And off they go, right? They don't look back behind them and go, oh, I can't stand that duck. Ah, what a jerk, right? But as humans, we play these stories over decades. Do you remember when I was a bridesmaid at her wedding? I've heard an older lady say once, I was like, honest to God, it was 60 years ago. Let it go. And how do you do that? You just don't bring it up. So that the spaces between that thought just become bigger, and they just start being, a footnote in your consciousness. It's not something that you keep regurgitating all the time. How someone did me wrong. I'm so justified in being a victim. Yada yada yada. It's how do you choose happiness? You just choose. Right?
Brilliant. So coming back to career stuff again and professional life and the philosophy underlying that, what are the top two things that you would say to somebody that you were counseling in terms of in your role as director, and the people you've interviewed and hired and fired and over that period of time? finding people that are excelling in the right role because it plays to their strengths and leaves room for challenge and growth. But for somebody looking for or in the process of change in their lives, which right now so many people are, what are the top two things you would just kind of say to them, just to kind of keep them balanced and in their minds, in their hearts, I should say?
Yeah. Oh, the top two things. I think that number one, you are never going to find the perfect job. No job is going to be perfect every single day, every minute of every day. There's always going to be some aspect of the job that you're asked to do that you hate. Or you would rather like, oh, God, I gotta just get through this. But if you choose it and you go, okay, you know what? I really hate doing filing, the budget, whatever it is. All right, well, you know what? I need to do this for the next 3 hours, and I'm gonna have to do it for 3 hours every month. But in the big scheme of things, it's a small piece. Move on. There's always going to be some aspect of some job you're going to have that you're going to hate. Suck it up and get on with it, right? Choose it. The second aspect of that is you are never going to find or create a work environment, whether you're your own business owner or you work for a company. You are never going to find a company where you love everybody and everybody loves you. It's not going to be perfect. And so you have to find the balance of, am I happy enough and interested enough and intrigued enough in my day-to-day job that I love doing my job every day? Maybe your job is working on an assembly line and you pick up a widget, and as the piece comes down the line, you put the widget in. Some people might say that's the most boring job in the world. But maybe the widget that you're putting on the piece on the assembly line is a circuit board for an X-ray machine. And you're like, every time I put a circuit board into this X-ray machine, I save someone's life. And if that is your internal motivation, fantastic. I had a colleague when I was working in transit system who drives a bus. He just retired a few years ago, retired at the age of like 57, because he'd been working as a bus driver since he was 20. And he had an MBA. And I said, look, why in my many younger years, in my 20s, I was like, I didn't get it. I was like, you drive the bus? He's like, yeah. He's like, I did my MBA. And he's like, I tried the corporate life for 2 years. He's like, I hated it. And he's like, what I really want to do is act in plays, write plays, and do community theater. He's like, but there's no money and there's no security in that. He's like, so driving a bus is fantastic because every time I'm on layover, I can read a couple of acts of my plays. I can do all my prep. He's like, while I'm driving all day long, I think about all the things that I need to do, and I'll voice record what I need to do on my, device or whatever. And that way, when I get home, I can do all my things for my volunteer things. He's like, this just pays the bills. My passion is in, drama and community theater. And I thought, and his wife was an MBA and a very, successful woman in her career. He's like, I want to stay home with the kids. But you could tell that in his choice of doing that, he was so happy and grounded in it. So I think that whatever you do, make sure that you're choosing it. Because if you're not choosing it, you'll always have a complaint about it. And when you complain, whether you verbalize it or not, your energy field reads that because you're miserable at work. And your performance reviews will go down. It creates drama at work. It'll create conflict. So, if you've been furloughed because due to COVID, and you are getting whatever job you can get to put food on the table and to meet your obligations, it's not a life sentence. But if you're happy to have that, you say, okay, you know what, I choose this. Maybe I'm just choosing this for a year or 2 years until things settle down and I can get back to doing what I want to do. Or maybe this is really an opportunity for me to learn something new, and actually, because it's not really taxing my skills, I can actually take that energy and put it into something else. So I think those are the two things. Whatever you're doing, choose it, and just recognize that not every environment is, it's not there to serve you. You are there to serve a work environment. And if you have to choose it for now, then choose it. And if you choose to get out of it, then don't be miserable about it. And say, hey, it's my choice. And the wind will blow in the right direction to sail you along.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's
You're welcome.
amazing. Thank you so much. And we've kind of gone in all kinds of different directions, but I think, you know, when it comes to creating a life that you choose, you know, work is such a huge part of who we are, what we do, how we see ourselves, and everything else in those connections. So it is really important to feel that you've had a choice in something and that you're connected to something, and that you're able to create rather than just feel like you're just surviving. And I think it comes back to that perspective that you might be taking a job in the interim to pay bills. But you can also have the perspective of, this may be that job, but I am able to create something better on top of this. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nancy. I really
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
time, your expertise. So, okay, well, we'll see you again soon, I hope.
Awesome. Take care.